Hi everyone, Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. We're on a mission to grow human-centric businesses. In the Fireside Chat series, we're celebrating inspiring leaders who care both about the strategic and human side of building great businesses. Right now, we're excited to be chatting with Erick Brimen, CEO of Prospera. Erick, thank you so much for joining us today. Erick, so you're
muted, Erick.
I said, thank you for having me. I'm very much looking forward to it.
So, Erick, you're clearly in a very cool place. We see a pretty fantastic ocean or sea and some palm trees behind you. I'm pretty sure we can't move on until you let our audience know, where are you and why are you there?
Sure. I am on the beautiful island in the Western Caribbean of Roatan. And the reason why we're here as Prospera is because we've entered into a public-private partnership with the government of Honduras, who owns this island, to develop on Roatan a phenomenal center of prosperity, a hub, city-scale place where young professionals from the country and around the world can come and set up shop and be part of a thriving economy and community where we share certain fundamental principles, including amongst them value for value exchange as an organizing principle, and the notion that having an impact in addition to making money is way better than just making money.
Love it. Couldn't agree more. Before we delve deeper into all of those wonderful things, curious to learn just a little bit more about Erick and who you are and how on earth you came up with this idea. It's a wonderful idea. I'm so curious how it came to you initially.
Well, first of all, I cannot claim it as my own idea. There's been a team of individuals, many and most part of Prospera, but also from around the world that have collectively, I would say, come up with different parts of the idea. But fundamentally, Dan, I was born and raised in Venezuela, a country that by any account has everything going for it in terms of natural resources, geographic location, great people, relatively peaceful environment for many, many, many decades. And yet it's a country that today is the poorest in the region, totally devastated by political unrest and social divisions. And, most recently, it's kind of obvious that it has a lot to do with political systems that don't work. However, it was already that way before Chavez and other more polarizing figures took over. And I grew up in that environment, and I was fortunate enough to not be amongst those that had a hard time finding food. In fact, I was quite privileged growing up, and I had access to wonderful education and a loving family. But it was never past me to realize that around me, the generalized conditions were very different. And I always wondered, why was it? Why was it that, what appeared to be kids just like me were actually living a totally different reality in the same country, same laws, same natural resources? So that got me off on a journey of inquiry as to why that was. And I, of course, realized that this was not just specific to Venezuela. It was rather endemic throughout the world. And that the great divide of our age is very anchored on the source of that problem, which is we have systems of governance and ways in which society gets organized, which works very well for a few, especially well-connected and wealthy individuals. And for the rest, not so much. And we're seeing this in every country, even a country such as the land of the free of the US. And so realizing this was not specific to Venezuela, I realized it was a big problem. And I guess I just wanted to find a way to solve it. And my journey of thinking through how to solve it went through a typical approach initially, because that problem shows up as poverty. But then I realized that that's not really the problem, or at least that's not the problem to solve. The problem to solve is, how do you catalyze prosperity? That's the name of our firm, Prospera. And when you look at the issue from that perspective, and you start to realize that in those areas around the world where prosperity abounds, where the general condition of the vast majority of people are not only decent, but thriving, and you realize that the common factor amongst those is not that people look a certain way or even speak a certain language or even are in a certain latitude, but that they share a certain system of governance and way in which society is structured, When you realize that that is the differentiating factor, then you realize that to solve the quote unquote problem of poverty or to unleash the potential of humans, you got to find a way to deliver those conditions to the most number of people possible and in the most sustainable way possible. And to do that, it had to be profitable, otherwise it cannot scale. And it had to be peaceful, thus a partnership approach to working with governments as opposed to trying to somehow push them aside. And it had to be voluntary, and it had to be on a greenfield site so that you can do the deep reform that is required without having to convince everybody at once and then impose upon them what we would think is a better system. So all that basically comes together over many decades of thoughts and work to basically becoming reality here on the island of Roatan for the benefit of the people of Roatan and Honduras, first and foremost, but as a platform which is intending to grow internationally and become a transnational platform for human prosperity, deployable anywhere in the world where host governments want to have a partner that gets that what they are after is to unleash the potential of their people. And that's what we are all about.
It's a beautiful story. And I love how you're so reflective. You've explored in a very introspective way your own growth, your own development, seen that you had access to some advantages that some others didn't, and you thought about what do we need to do in order to help more people. So I love how you brought your own story, so much of your own experience into what you're building. Curious to learn just a little bit more about when you talk about the conditions that are necessary for prosperity. You talked about peacefulness and the need for it to be voluntary. I'm curious if you could just flesh out just a little bit more for our audience, what it is you think is essential for creating those conditions for prosperity.
Sure. Well, first, let's start with the most basic and essential observations of facts and the world as is. We as human beings are a very different type of being than every other being on this planet. We thrive in innovation. We can create things and new ideas. We can envision the future and work to create it as opposed to just show up every day as a brand new day and be subject to the natural conditions around us. That's the one thing that differentiates us from basically every other species by a wide margin. I'm not going to get into the biological reasons why. It just is, and we should just accept that that's a fact. Now, for that distinct feature of what it means to be human to actually play a role at creating generalized prosperity, for that to be possible, there are certain conditions that we all have to agree by to interact with each other as civilized human beings, so that your innovation and your dedication to solving problems makes sense for you as an individual to pursue, and that when you achieve it, it benefits you and others, right? Without it being something where you are now held hostage or even forced to produce value for others, because that doesn't work. So humans have the ability to create, but they're individuals of, we are beings that have free will, and that for innovation to happen, you got to allow free thinking to take place with freedom to create and a system through which to distribute that benefit to as many people as possible. So that's in a very abstract sense. The observation as to how that shows up more often than not is that you got to have three core and fundamental conditions be present in a society and shared amongst enough people where there are network effects and synergies. Condition number one, we have to have a shared set of rules that we all agree to abide by. These rules need to be not only any type of rules, they have to be the type of rules that start by recognizing human rights, and that the most essential human right is property rights, right? The most basic property right is your body and your mind, and every derivative value that comes from that, where you put effort or thought into it, is also a property, which is just as yours as your body is. So basically, at the very core of it all, rules that recognize that, and that simply create a system for, if your property is yours, how can I get access to it? Basically, if it's your property, the only way I can get access to it is by you letting me get an access to it. So that's where property rights plus voluntary exchanges of value for value come in. Because if it's your property, but I can force my way into getting it, at best, that's going to significantly discourage you from creating more products, more solutions. And that's to the detriment of it all. So the first basic condition is good rules. Number two, a good way to resolve disputes. So we might have the same rules, but we might interpret them differently. Or the conditions might be such that we have partial information. And being good faith actors, we might disagree as to whether or not you told me $10 or $1,000, and whether or not you told me I had access to property for a month. Like, there are legitimate reasons why we disagree. We have to have a peaceful way to resolve those disputes. So that condition number two is dispute resolution or justice. You got to have access to justice to resolve disputes peacefully. And the third condition is security. Basically, both you and I need to know that we're all going to abide by the same rules, that if we have a dispute, we're going to resolve it through a fair and unbiased process, but ultimately that, the rule of law will prevail, and that both you and I, even if we disagree, the guy who's right and the person who's wrong, we're going to both abide by the same approach, and that bad actors, people with bad intentions, will not be able to use force as a mechanism to get access to, the products of your body and your mind, basically. So good rules, dispute resolution, and security. In our empirical analysis of all societies around the world that are thriving, those three conditions must be in place. If those three conditions are not in place, nothing else really matters. And either they are already not prosperous, or they're on their way to not be prosperous. There are other things that you can do. And so when we think of Prospera as a platform for prosperity, of course, we include those three basic things. But there are other things, like, for instance, ensuring that there is affordable education to the vast majority of people early on in their life so that they can be productive members of society. That makes a big difference. However, it doesn't need to be provided by a central provider, but it does need to be provided in general. Healthcare, for obvious reasons, is also important. Basic physical infrastructure to get around and, have access to low-cost electricity that is reliable, water, the protection of the environment so that we all have a place as beautiful as this. All these things matter and make a big difference, but only relevant if they're building on top of that core foundation of three elements that I mentioned earlier. And by the way, those things are things that are currently provided by the traditional governmental structures that we're familiar with. These are nonprofit entities that run on politics, right? You got political actors playing political games to get elected and be, in one way or another, in command and control of the apparatus that is designed to provide those three core services. And it's a heck of a lot better than society and humanity had, 1,000 years ago. We believe that it can be powerfully enhanced through public-private partnerships, where the intention of delivering those services is better delivered when you inject the private and for-profit motive with professional world-class providers in a platform of collaboration with that shared vision for what must be true as a service for the largest number of people to prosper, by every individual being able to do what they do best and then trade voluntarily with each other.
I love that, Eric. I feel like you're like the modern version of enlightened philosophy. I'm like going back in time. This is beautiful. I am very curious, more concretely, how, if a person is living in Honduras, wants to have, more prosperity, more opportunity in their life, how can they go and, receive the services of Prospera? And what exactly would they get? What exactly concretely does it look like?
Sure, great question. Well, the first thing is, once you realize that those three core services are they're services, right? I mean, it's just a service. Like, you put them in a basket and you call them the service of good governance, okay? So the first thing is the paradigm has to shift and realize that those things are services. And like, services are provided by service providers, and you choose, and in the world of private and for-profit, you generally have multiple options. You can usually, shop around for pricing, and then you pick and go with the provider that you as a customer like most. And if there's competition, if they stop providing you with a good service, or if they jack up your prices, then you switch and you go to a different service provider. Now, so the first thing that Prospera is about is to transcend the notion that there should only be one monopolistic provider, that no matter what your preference is as an individual, you have to go with the collective decision of how we are all to receive that service, because 51% of people wanted it that way. It's not the way how you buy cars. It's not the way you purchase telecommunication services. So first thing is you got to transcend the paradigm for what I'm about to say to make sense. But once you realize that good governance is in fact a service, then that is what Prospera is providing in partnership with governments, so that together we bring the best of the public sector with the best of the private sector, okay? So what does it look like? This is designed first and foremost for Hondurans to have access to better governance within their national boundaries, because our first deployment is here in Honduras on the island of Roatan. And they're a customer. So if they want to be part of Prospera, they have to apply as a resident, and they buy a house or they rent a house. They have access to jobs. And, it's like if you were to think of a city as a provider of service, and if you were asking me, well, how does a city get customers? Well, you got to have a beautiful place to live that's affordable. You gotta catalyze an economy where there are employers looking for employees, where there are places where the innovators and the creators and the entrepreneurs can do their thing. They're not looking for a job, but they do need access to labor pools. They do need access to electricity. They need access to these basics. So that's what we're doing. We have 3 dimensions to what we're doing that come together. We have a legal, code, and service dimension, which I've already explained. That's fine. We got a physical dimension, which is the built environment. And for that, we've partnered with world-class firms to help visualize the master plan and then in phases execute the built out environment in a very functional way, in a very socially responsible way, in a very environmentally friendly way, so that the built out environment is exactly the type of place where the best people in Honduras and around the world would want to live, with good education, high security. I mean, would you not want to be here, right? If just across, within 5 minutes walking, you could have an amazing, fulfilling job. And then 5-minute walking from there, you had a beautiful home with oceanfront view. And then 5 minutes walking from there, your kids can go to school at a world-class academy, and then they can go to university. I mean, that's what everybody wants. So that has a built environment component to our service. And that's the second dimension. And the third dimension is you want to have a thriving economy. You want to have a bunch of economic actors in synergy working for the benefit of each other, resulting in everybody being better off. So the way that looks like to us as Prospera is, not only have we come up with a legal system in partnership with Honduras that works a heck of a lot better, not only are we coordinating the creation of the built environment, but we have a very active and robust business development unit, which is strategically looking for, targeting, and then attracting economic actors, companies, employers, whether they're banks, insurance companies, hotel operators, school operators. I mean, all sorts of companies that would benefit from some of the conditions that we have to offer, which include amazing talents, yes, but also low taxes, simple regulation, stable and reliable legal environments with international treaty level of protection. So we're creating the conditions for the most enterprising individuals and companies to come together and unleash the trapped potential that the Honduran people have, because there's so much trapped potential here. And I know I'm giving you a long answer, but let me close with this particular statistics for you to understand the level of amazing potential that exists here, that is accessible through the Prospera platform. The average Honduran in Honduras, according to GDP per capita statistics, generates about $3,000 a year in average income. I don't know how they survive on that level of average income. It's ridiculous. I just don't know how they do it. It's a miracle that they survive. But that's the reality, okay? Look it up. GDP per capita in Honduras is about $3,000. That's sad, but here's what's exciting. The Hondurans that choose to leave their country, risking their lives illegally through caravans or through other means, crossing into the United States of America, where the system of governance is different. I would argue it's more stable, it's much more property rights oriented, et cetera, et cetera. Those human beings, within a year and a half to 2 years maximum, according to Pew Research, are making on average $30,000+ a year. 30, that's 10 times more. nothing has really changed about their DNA. Well, nothing has changed about their DNA. Nothing has really changed about their level of education. You don't get a college degree or become a doctor or something like that in a year. What has changed is the generalized conditions of good governance from one artificial border to another. Now, what is exciting is that Prospera is basically trying to reverse the trend of Honduras exporting its best talent and instead having a conduit by which to import best practices of good governance so that Hondurans and Roatanians can prosper here at home. And that's not just a wonderful humanitarian thing to do. We have structured it as a highly profitable business model. Value that we're delivering is the most important service that humanity needs, and everybody needs it. And it makes not a difference, it makes the difference between poverty and hell and prosperity and living in paradise. It is the thing that makes the difference. So in any case, obviously I'm a bit biased, but I have an amazing team that we pulled together. And I just know because we're actually building, things are coming together. It's already happening and it's super exciting. So, but back to you. You're the ones that need to be asking the questions.
Now, this is amazing. You're clearly like the project of such huge scale that it takes a moment just to wrap your mind around what it is you're building. It's incredible. I'm pretty blown away. I am curious, for our audience is mostly CEOs. There are going to be some skeptics out there. I'm sure you've dealt with skeptics. You said that you think this is can be potentially the most profitable company in the world. I am curious, do you monetize the way that a standard government, a standard city municipality would? Like how do you monetize? How do you build this to be a streamlined, profitable business? It's so different. It's so unique.
Well, it's a platform, okay? And those CEOs and people who understand how platforms make money will probably understand intuitively. And a short call such as this is probably outside of the scope for a deep business model conversation. But suffice it to say that through various mechanisms, including participation in real estate deals, which is the built environment, investing strategically in ventures, in early movers that are both necessary to catalyze the economy, but that will also benefit disproportionately with the better legal environment that they're operating inside of. So that's venture investing. And by charging a very small fee, but of pretty much all of the economic activity, so a very small percentage of the value that's transacting through the platform. When you combine those three sources of revenue, a small percentage of the economic activity, right, investing in strategic ventures and participating in real estate deals, the combination of those three things is just more than covers the cost of setting it up, and then it scales exponentially because just like every platform, if you build the foundation, it scales very rapidly, just like software. So in a nutshell, that's the model. And since I know you have an audience of very purposeful CEOs, if I can, inside of a minute, pitch and say that if you're interested in not only having the capacity to create the value that you are obviously passionate to create, but to do so in an environment that is purpose-built for you to be empowered to create the value that only you can do, that you're best at, and you want to do it inside of a context where you're going to be surrounded by like-minded individuals looking to do good while doing well, then, please go to prospera.hn and get in contact. Write me personally, and I would love to speak with you. We're actively recruiting the types of individuals that I think this network represents to both be part of the real estate story by investing early in a condo unit here, for example. And most importantly, to find out how you being an early mover, you can benefit from what we're creating by also benefiting the project. So you can cut that out later if it's inappropriate for me to pitch so directly, but I really do think that the group of people that you've pulled together and what we're doing are very relevant for each other, and I hope to hear about it from you all.
I'm really glad that you pitched directly, Eric. I actually was going to encourage you to do that. And I think one of the ways that we can even magnify the impact of the pitch is to talk a little bit more about your partners, about the team behind all this. You mentioned at the beginning that it's not just your idea, you've had the benefit of some world-class partners, and I know particularly in the real estate space, that's the case. Could you tell us in a little bit more detail about some of the world-class partners and team that you built to make this exciting project a reality?
Sure. A lot of information is under prospera.hn in the about section. Although, there's more partnerships that we've been onboarding in the last 6 months or so. But some of the groups that I can highlight, you mentioned real estate. We're working with Jacobs Engineering, which is probably one of the top firms globally when it comes to large scale, development, from everything from basic infrastructure to water treatment to electricity. I mean, the whole 9 yards. Jacobs.com, look them up. They're a huge firm. And they also happen to be the world's best firm at managing cities that decide to outsource the municipal services to a third party to manage. So, Jacobs, we're very early for a Jacobs project, but they're on board because they believe in the vision and they want to be part of deploying their expertise to make such a meaningful difference in a place like Honduras. So you can look at Jacobs. When it comes to design and architecture of not just units, but the whole supply chain and the building systems, we're working hand in glove with Zaha Hadid Architects, which is a world-class firm when it comes to architecture. What a lot of people don't get to see is a division within that firm that is, deeply focused in research and development. And it's like the Bell Labs equivalent of architecture, I think, in the world, but certainly within Zaha Hadid. And with them, we've really invested a lot of time in thinking through how do we develop the built out environment rapidly with low environmental impact, maximum economic benefit to the local economies, and a world-class product at a low cost. It's like we want it all. You generally have to give up on something, quality, speed, or cost. We want it all. And so we're working with the best. And as you'll see on our website, we're delivering on that promise in this early set of opportunities for investors to come in. So that's a bit of the built environment. And look, we're also working with Lava, which is a top firm out of Australia, and a whole bunch of people. I think I'm going to do injustice to our time if I try to name everybody on that space, but that's one area. When it comes to the legal and services that I mentioned, but setting up the whole legal environment, we have been quite privileged at bringing together world-class legal experts and judges who are very active in understanding what works and what doesn't. And so if you go to our website, again, prospera.hn, and then you look through the platform section, you will discover that an engine of our system is our arbitration center, which is like a court. It's a court purpose-made to understand the Prospera legal system and then be the provider of justice in the resolution of disputes. Their website is PAC, like PAC.hn. And when you look through it, I think everybody will realize the level of world-class judges and legal professionals that are part of this part of the enterprise. I'm talking former Supreme Court justices within the United States, like former Supreme Court Justice of Arizona, very, very senior, top-notch people that are the best in the world when it comes to understanding common law and how specifically Prospera has created a legal system purpose-built to maximize prosperity of all involved. So that's, I've talked about built environment, I've talked about the legal system. By the way, we have such a great in-house team. I would invite people to see on our website on Nick Dranis, who's my general counsel, our general counsel, and he's just phenomenal. But anyways, I can go on and bragging about everybody because we've got such a great team. The third dimension of the ventures that I was mentioning of our business model, we're actually building out that team right now. I have a bit of background in venture capital. My chief operating officer, Nick Jenkins, has some background on that. But we're in the process right now. We're building a world-class team of special situation investors, venture capital investors, and we are about to announce the first batch of 3 individuals that are fairly senior partners in various venture capital firms that are going to be the initial brain trust that are going with us to really develop the strategy and then help identify the general partners of the Prospera Ventures Fund, which will systemically look for opportunities and invest strategically in these options. So I'm not at liberty yet to disclose who these people are, but they are they're amongst the best. You know, these are names that people will readily recognize in top-notch firms. And more than anything right now, it's a challenge to try to figure out, based on timing, what's the right engagement strategy, as opposed to whether we have access to the best people or not.
Super, super exciting. Thank you for telling the audience a little bit more about your team. Speaking of timing, as we come towards the end of our time together today, Eric, maybe I can put two words together. One of the questions we love to end on is a human note. You know, it's a tricky time for many people, this pandemic, but it's important to keep some balance and to find ways to have fun in the midst of all the change that's going on in the world. And so I'm curious, how do you what does Eric do for fun? What's fun for you these days?
Well, Prospera. I'm not working, I'm having fun. And I mean that in the most sincere of ways. I mean, sometimes I have to purposefully dedicate time to the things that most people call fun. And I enjoy it, but I don't enjoy it nearly as much as just continuing to build what we're building here and having the opportunity, frankly, the privilege, the distinct honor and privilege to work with the individuals that have made up the Prospera team. That is the most fun thing that I have going for me. Second only to my family. You know, my family, my wife, who is my biggest partner in this venture and in life. Colleen, I love you, sweetie. You know, without her, none of this could be possible. And she's by far the most enjoyable person for me to spend time with. My kids, I got 3 kids, Eric John and Victoria Lee and Caroline Ann. And so, you know, they're the only thing that beats my dedicating a lot of time with Prospera. And frankly, between those two things, I generally have more than 100% of my time booked. But when I manage to really force myself to do, quote unquote, traditionally fun things, I mean, right now in Roatan, for instance, is one of the world's best places to scuba dive in. So that's you know, snorkeling or scuba diving. I mean, look at that. Any beach water sport type activity is a lot of, you know, fun in a traditional sense. So I get to do some of that. You know, that's about it. I mean, I don't want to sound like the type of person who only focuses on work, but this is not work for me. It's really life transforming, and everybody in the team feels that way. So we all have our own, you know, Prospera passion projects that on a quarter by quarter basis we try to focus on. Whether it is we got a music project, for example, with a local village community, and some people in the company that love music are collaborating with some of the more artistic individuals in that community, and they're going to create a single over the next quarter. So that's kind of fun. And other people like woodworking, so they're thinking of doing a woodworking workshop with members of the local community to, you know, to help train them as how to be better carpenters. Another group loves soccer, so they're doing a fantasy soccer league with the best players of Honduras, with the intention of enrolling them into being a source of inspiration in terms of principles and values that Prospera seeks to share with people, and that we believe are at the source of having a prosperous life. And so having a fantasy soccer league with individuals that can then speak and say, hey, here's why you want to work on a value for value environment, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a passion project, but obviously all of these are intertwined and connected with the Prospera mission and our business efforts.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, it sounds like both a profitable place to live, but also a really fun place to live, which is a wonderful, wonderful combination. As are you, Eric. Really, really just enjoyed this conversation. Loved your pitch, and excited to help you get that pitch out to more folks, and so excited about what you're building for Honduras and for the world. So awesome to have you on today.
Thank you, Dan. And if I can, in 30 seconds, I'm looking for an experienced real estate developer partner, perhaps that comes from private equity, but that can help us structure, you know, large deals. We have a master plan. We segment that into macro lots. I want to bring somebody who can help manage that process and manage a competitive bidding approach to having a decentralized yet powerfully aligned way of having multiple people concurrently developing with a shared vision, but their own individual projects that they're passionate about. So I'm looking for somebody that can help be that person to crystallize the vision and then manage the process. So anybody in that field should contact me, and Dan, maybe the best way for them to contact you first, and then you can put us in contact.
Beautiful, beautiful. Erick, really excited, glad that you added that last pitch in there, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem. Thank you, guys.